Hello students, welcome to Lab A6. This is going to be over Ohm's Law, and we want to take a look at this. Now, as we do this laboratory, we're going to look at a couple of things. We want to, first of all, take a look at the circuitry here. What we're going to do as far as measuring resistors. Now, this table should look familiar because this is the one we did last time. So you will need to refer to your color code chart and fill out this part. If you look at the previous page, you'll see that some of this information has already been completed for you. So take a look at that and make sure you understand how the color code works. So we're going to work on this chart. This first chart is just to give you the actual color code, and you're going to actually measure it with your ohm meter. And then once we do this, we're going to start building some circuitry. So we'll measure our resistors individually, record those, and then we're going to build some circuits. These are what I refer to as wiring diagrams. There's some instructions here. You need to pay attention to those instructions. Make sure you read those, and your instructor will help you out in lab if you have any questions or anything. If I look at this first lab, it's R1 and R2 together, and then what I do is I exchange 2 for 3, and then I exchange 3 for 4. And so on and so forth. So I'm building a circuit, a series circuit, with only 2 resistors in it. So let's take a look at that. What that looks like is the wiring diagram looks like this. If I look at this top circuit, this is going to be the schematic drawing I have for this circuit. Just the R1 and R2, and what we're going to do is we're going to change this resistor out 2 or 3 times and do our measurements. Now what that looks like, if I were drawing this on the proto board, it would look something like this. This is what you have on your page. As you notice that these are 2 resistors, R1, R2. This is sort of the connections we have in the proto board, so I want you to make sure you understand that these two resistors are connected right here in the middle. And then this resistor is bus to the bus line here, and then to the bus line here. And over here goes to the positive and negative end of your power supply. If I were to build this circuit, it would look like this. This is the circuit that you have in your book. So you can see is that there's just a couple of resistors here, R1 and R2. I've got R1 going to the bus line of the red here, which attaches to the power supply. And down here, R2, which attaches to the bottom line, which is the negative end of the power supply. Now, when you first build this, you are going to, before you put the power supply in, you have your 2 leads coming out here. Here's my positive and negative leads. And I'm going to measure ohms. So I'm going to take my digital multimeter, and I'm going to set that up here, right next to my circuit. And this is I want to make sure I turn my meter on. I want to make sure that I get it in the correct format. It's going to say ohms up here at the top. If you look in the top left corner, and then OL just means that it's reading infinity or out of limits. And then I'm going to measure my resistors alone or by themselves. So nothing is hooked to my power, nothing is hooked to my circuit. I insert my meter. So measure resistors alone. And this is my total resistance for those 2 guys. And if it comes undone, you just plug it right back in. And now you can do your reading again. There you go. So about 1.8 k ohm. That's what you would expect with these 2 resistors. I'm going to disconnect my ohm meter. And then we're going to work on building, applying voltage here. I've taken my circuitry and I've applied 9 volts. And so if you look at my circuit here, I'll apply my 9 volts here. And let me turn my power supply on. I've already got the power supply set, so now I'm going to look at individual voltage readings. So the way I measure voltage is I measure voltage across. So I will measure across R1 and then R2. So we want to pay attention to polarity when we're measuring these voltages. And polarity just means that the positive lead goes closest to the positive end of the circuit and the negative goes to the closest end of negative. Make sure I change my mode here to read voltage. And I look at my drop here, and there's my drop for R1. And then I go ahead and move my leads, and now I'm measuring voltage for R2. And this is with resistors 1 and 2. The voltage drop of R2 is there. So that accounts for all the voltage that I've applied to the circuit. I record that. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to measure current. Now current is when you measure the electrons going through the circuit. So make sure that my lead is in the milliamp slot. So we're going to make sure that this lead here goes to where it says MA for milliamps. We got to make sure that we select the milliamp setting. And then what we want to do is we're going to break our circuit at one end. Yes. We match up the same polarity, so the two negative leads there. My circuit between the two red leads right there. And then I turn my power supply back on. We make sure we're going there, go there. And then you'll get a reading here as we go through this. So what you're going to do is just go through this thing. So a reminder on these things when we're looking at these different ways to measure things is the first thing is that we measure our ohms by itself without the meter attached. The second thing is we're going to measure voltage across. So your circuit's working and your meter goes across the part I didn't erase. So let's get that there. And then the last thing is that I break the circuit and I insert the meter in series. And that's what I have here. I have a break or a gap between here and here. And my meter is completing the circuitry by forcing the electrons to go through the meter and then through the circuit. So those are the three things we're going to practice on this particular lab where we can measure voltage, current, and resistance. We'll see you next time in lab.